Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And once again, thank you for joining us on our California Nevada chat here on Friday, December 3rd. We thank our Southern California partners, Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer Tom Addis, Assistant Executive Director and Chief Operating Officer Nikki Gatch, and Chief Financial Officer Jeff Johnson, and Bryce Seaver. Bryce and Tyler Miller and Caitlin Doyle, all part of our on-air team, bringing us to you live. So our guest this morning, like to welcome Mark Chetchat. Mark is in Dallas. Mark's been with the PGA of America for quite some time. Mark's the Senior Director of Member Championships, Rules and Competitions. So we'll have some great conversation with Mark this morning. And of course, our platform, our voice of reason, Craig Kessler, Voices Director of Governmental Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association. And, first things, we seems to have COVID or variants on the rise again. So everyone, please be careful, be safe, maintain distancing where necessary and where appropriate. And of course, following local rules and regulations regarding masking, so we can all be as safe as we can and be healthy, especially as we head deeper into the holiday season, which is a time of gathering with family and friends and being close. And we want to keep that as positive as we can. Of course, thank you all for all the work since March of 2020 for keeping us open and going through this golf boom and success together. So Tom is not able to join us this morning. Nikki is not able to join us this morning. So let's get started. And what I'd like to do is have some opening remarks from our Northern California PGA president, Didi Moriarty. Didi?
No, thanks, Len. Great program today, Mark. I'm really interested in all the information that you're going to give us. And Craig, always great to hear from you. And I'm sure it's going to be a great session. So everybody, what Len said, I just echo, be safe, keep our clients safe, our people safe in golf, and onward we go, as Len likes to say.
Okay, thank you, Didi. So let me introduce Mark Chetchat. Mark is the Senior Director of Member Championships, Rules and Competitions. So what we've talked about, Mark, let's first off, give everyone a little bit of a background about yourself, and then let's start off with some talk about the great success at Whistling Straits this year, and what goes into setting up a championship, what goes into setting up a Ryder Cup when we're talking about fan logistics and hole locations and all of that. So Mark, it's all yours.
All right, perfect. Well, thanks, Len. Thanks for the introduction. I'm excited to be here today, and I think it's really entertaining to sit here and talk about basically distance and the distance debate. And if you think that hitting the ball has become a major obstacle, hitting it too far in the game of golf. Before we really get into that, I'll just touch base on kind of the Ryder Cup and setting it up for the Ryder Cup. The Ryder Cup was super exciting. I mean, right now we have a joint rules committee, that course setup committee that actually sets up the Ryder Cup. So I was on that committee along with my European counterpart. We basically go through the entire Ryder Cup. We look at hole locations, select all the hole locations, and then we also select the teeing grounds for basically on how we want the holes to play. And we factor in wind conditions, how the architect wants the hole to play, and basically a number of items to really make it challenging. But as challenging as we want to make it, we also never want to be the story. So, I mean, that's always in the back of our minds. I mean, we don't want to make a hole location that's going to be talked about for the rest of the week or seem unfair. And same with setting up tee markers. We don't want the course to play too long, which really these days, as far as everyone's hitting the golf ball, that's not really a possibility, it seems like. But I mean, we factor in all those variables and then come up with kind of a game plan early in the week, and then we kind of stick to that game plan. But again, we do make modifications based on wind conditions, wind speeds, how firm the course is playing, if it's drying out, if there's been any rain or rain in the forecast. So it's fun. Again, looking at the distance debate, it's interesting, and I think everyone probably watched the Ryder Cup, and they could see some of the drives Bryson DeChambeau hit. I mean, you look at the fifth hole, that par 5, and the 417-yard tee shot that he hit on that hole. That's a line that we thought about, but not really quite as far as he cut the corner. I mean, he flew the ball over 380 yards to get it down to, I think he had 117 yards into the hole or something ridiculous, where he hit a lob wedge into a par 5. And then you go into the sixth hole, another fun short hole, short par 4, 370-yard par 4, so it's short normally. We did push the tees up a little bit on that hole, roughly to make the hole play about 320 yards. And the exciting thing about that is, I mean, if we're going to make a hole drivable, we want it to be drivable for everyone in the competition, just not the longer hitters. I mean, a lot of times when we do that, whether it's at a Ryder Cup or a PGA Championship, when we do push that tee forward, again, it's everyone can have an opportunity to go for the green and off the tee shot. And it really, the longer hitters hit 3-wood into the green. During the Ryder Cup, I mean, even when we had the tee back on that sixth hole on that par 4, you look at Bryson even was going for the green when it was all the way back. So it was pretty exciting. And I mean, that's kind of where the game's going now. I mean, when we're looking at setting up golf courses, I mean, you're looking at that turn point now, really where you expect tee shots to go is roughly in that 295 to probably 310 average. And that's kind of what we're looking at, where they're using drivers, I mean, on dog legs, and where bunkers should come into play. I mean, that's kind of when we expect them to hit driver. That's really the kind of the factor. We know there's players that obviously hit it a lot farther than that. And then there's a few players that hit it not quite to 300. But I think overall the distance that the tour players are hitting are averaging over 300 yards. I don't think it's just under 305 yards. I did have a few slides, and I can't really present them, can't figure out how to present it, but I mean, there was a report that came out this past February that really just talked about distance, and I have a number of charts on it. I may try to send this to you, Bryson, and you can present it because I'm struggling on presenting right now. Or Bryce, if I can do that.
Okay, let's try that, Mark. And as we go through the days on a Ryder Cup or a PGA, you know, we've got 4 days of a PGA Championship. We have 3 days of a Ryder Cup in different formats. Does the course setup take into consideration the formats? For instance, you know, the 4-ball against the foursomes, and then the singles. Whereas a PGA event or another event, you know, it's the same. It's individual stroke play all 4 days. Does the format affect the setup?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, we definitely factored that in when we were coming up with our game plan for the Ryder Cup for each session, whether it's 4-ball or foursome or singles. So we kind of, I would say in general for the foursomes, it's probably slightly easier, although there are some challenging hole locations. And for the 4-ball, when you have 2 players of the caliber players that are playing in the Ryder Cup, I mean, they're a little more on the challenging side. Definitely playing a little longer and more challenging hole locations. I think when you get into the singles, I mean, when we're looking at hole locations and setup, basically we're setting it up as it's the final round of the PGA Championship. So we definitely want to challenge the players. There'll be a good mix of some challenging hole locations and some easier hole locations to bring the excitement. I mean, we want to see birdies. We want to see people win holes, or players win the holes with birdies. I mean, I think everyone thinks that's exciting.
Yeah, no question, Mark. Like we like seeing home runs. We like to be on the happy side of a home run, you know, during baseball games as well. So, Mark, talk a little bit about the team. You know, we had the 6 rookies. We're playing on our home soil, and just the team and the atmosphere in general just had to be crazy.
Oh, the atmosphere was absolutely ridiculous. I mean, and I've been fortunate to be gone to a number of sporting events, and I still think by far the Ryder Cup is the most exciting event you can go to. Just the atmosphere alone. You don't get to see a lot of golf. You see some, but the overall atmosphere is just electric. I mean, it's probably the best event you could ever attend. It's phenomenal. I mean, and the players, that first tee experience with the entire horseshoe around the first tee with primarily an American crowd. I mean, a lot of the Europeans weren't able to make it over to this past Ryder Cup. So it was primarily an American crowd. And I mean, they really were excited for our Americans. I will say that. So it's neat. And then you look at the rookies. I mean, their experience, they played phenomenal. I mean, it's like I said, it's an event. Once you go through it, I think from a player standpoint, it's exciting. I mean, you're nervous. I mean, I heard players comment. I mean, that's the most nervous they've ever been hitting that tee shot in front of the gallery. I mean, more nervous than any other major. I mean, that's the most nervous they've been trying to hit that tee shot. Granted, the first hole you could hit driver. I don't know if I'd want to try to hit an iron off that first tee with the nerves. That would be a challenging shot. But I mean, that first hole at 417 yards, again, go back to our friend Bryson, he drove the green on that singles match. And granted, there was very little wind. So he basically flew that ball probably in the 350, 360 yards and ends up making that eagle putt to really jumpstart his match. I mean, it's fun. I mean, and to see birdies and birdies win the hole, that's exciting. I mean, I think everyone likes to see birdies. No one really likes to see the players struggle that much. It gets the gallery and the crowd more excited when they're seeing putts go in.
Yeah, no question, Mark. Well, I think we can talk about the excitement when we've got heart monitors on players. That's certainly a clue about how they feel, because most of the time when we see them, it looks cool, calm, and collected, but not the case when we've got a monitor on their heartbeats on the first tee at a Ryder Cup.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's fun to watch that, and we were fortunate enough to see a little bit of that and to see what their heart rate does. I mean, to see the spike, especially when the ball may be in the air. I mean, if it's trying to get over water or whatever the case may be, to see that little spike, and did I really hit that as good as I think I did, or did I not? So, I mean, kind of that heart monitor tells quite a bit.
So, Mark, one more on the on that, and then we'll jump over to the USGA and the driver. Is the cooperation and such the same? You know, I saw you in Paris for the Ryder Cup there. We said hi and saw you out, you know, again, doing whole locations. Pretty much the same level of cooperation from the Europeans when we get over there?
Yeah, it's the same thing. So basically it's in the captain's agreement. So regardless of whether we're on US soil or across the pond, I mean, in the captain's agreement, there is a setup committee that basically are separate from the referees and separate from the side that work jointly together on selecting hole locations and how the course is going to play, selecting tee locations. And basically they have the authority to do what they want. So again, I've been fortunate enough to do that the last 2 years. As has my European tour counterpart. He's done the same thing as well, Mats Lanner. And so it's been exciting. I mean, we've got a great relationship. We kind of see the way holes should be played and kind of have the same mentality. So when we're setting up the golf courses, it really has been pretty easy for us to do. I mean, and it's, again, the biggest thing in our mind is we never want to be that story. I mean, so we were always thinking that in the back of our mind. I mean, we want to make sure it's a good hole location. It's fair, it's challenging, but not one that's going to be ridiculous, that's going to come back and bite us. So yeah, very, very similar over there as well.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. So now we've got it. When does prep start? Or maybe it's already started for 23 in Rome. And then I believe in 25, it's back to Bethpage, right? So what's the process now getting ready for Rome?
So Rome is, we talked a little bit about Rome actually at the past Ryder Cup, and we're excited about that. The European Tour actually has an event played on the course. So that's good for them. So they've got some good information, but really, I mean, hopefully I'll get over there maybe end of this year or early next year to take a look at the golf course and go around with Mats and look at it and talk about actually Ryder Cup setups. So that would be exciting. And I think it'll be another fun test for sure. So, I mean, that's definitely on the horizon and something to look forward to. I think the Ryder Cup just continues to grow and the excitement level continues to grow. And it was actually really good to see the US win a Ryder Cup.
Yeah, that's great, Mark. So again, Mark, on that aspect, congratulations on all the work, the Ryder Cup, the PGA Championship with Kerry and the setup, and just making us so proud, as the PGA family to be out there and have our name to that. So well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. And so there's some history here with the driver length limitation. So I don't necessarily think we call it the Bryson effect. He might have just lit the fire again, but this was, the USGA and RNA say they started poking at this in about 2014 and actually brought a proposal in 16, but it went on the shelf at that time. So, and I guess it's interesting too that as I read, typically Bryson uses a driver that's 45 3/4. So do you think the Bryson effect has just been the reignite of this discussion, Mark? And what, as you've been part of it, what is our stance as the PGA of America?
Yeah, I think the Bryson effect, and I think just in general, I mean, Bryson hits it a long way out, and a lot of the tour players as well. But now you look at the younger generation still coming out of college. These college players that are coming out now that aren't even on the tour, that are trying to get to the tour, hit the ball just as long as Bryson, are incredibly long. So I don't think you can really call it the Bryson effect. I think it's just in general, the younger players are going through a lot more training or experimenting more with longer equipment and how they can gain that extra 5-10 yards, whatever they may get, to give them a little bit of an advantage. So I think when you actually dive into the model local rule G10, I mean, it's a step in the direction to actually try to limit really that direction of distance control, and trying to dial it back a little bit, not let all these players just go out and start experimenting with 48-inch drivers, trying to hit it as far as they can. It's really just kind of dialing it back. So hopefully that stays pretty level on where it's at. And yeah, you're right. I mean, the USGA has been talking about it for quite some time, since probably 2014. And obviously their research shows that, I mean, the driver length does translate to more distance. I mean, they've gone through it, they've researched it, and they see that the increase in club head speed and increases the ball speed and results in increasing the distance. I mean, it's funny when you actually think about what this is, we're talking about with this club length. You're really only talking about that 2 inches, roughly 4 or 5 yards. So it's not a significant amount of distance. Oh.
There we go. Looks like Bryce has brought up the G10
Okay, yeah.
rule.
Yeah, so perfect. So I mean, you can look at that and you can see it's doing is just really prohibiting the use of club length longer than 46 inches, because we know in Rule 4 and the player's equipment, more specifically with the equipment rules, that it says other than the part of the maximum club length must not exceed 48 inches. So this is just really limiting that to the 46 inches. And it's also important to note that, I mean, this is not a rule. This is just an option for those that are conducting competitions. I mean, and it's really recommended for those, and you read it right there in it, only in competitions limited to highly skilled players, i.e. professional competitions or elite amateur competitions. So from that standpoint, I mean, most likely we will look at instituting this in the PGA Championship and the KitchenAid Senior PGA Championship. We're still discussing. We haven't come to a final determination on that yet. Will this apply to our member events? Again, we're looking at that right now. You know, we have no definitive answer right now. It's just something we're talking about and talking to the committee about. We look to have an answer, obviously, before the end of the year, and we've got another call coming up in a couple of weeks to really probably dive into this a little more, find out if this is something we want to do for our member championships or not.
Did we, as an organization, Mark, have comments on that? You know, there's generally a comment period, right, for these types of things, and what was our stance, or what is our stance? You know?
I think our stance is, in general, we do agree that there's an issue with the distance. There is no doubt about that. It's hard to say, and I don't think we've come out with a definitive stance on whether or not that requires a rollback or changing the golf ball to limit the amount of distance. I mean, I think right now, if you look at it, is we don't want the ball to travel any further than it is right now. So whatever we can do to kind of maintain where we're at right now is probably optimal. I mean, we don't want to go back. I mean, you're putting so much pressure on courses to become longer, and that's a challenge. I mean, a lot of the classic historic courses are, I hate to say, are becoming a little less, are a little more obsolete. I mean, because they don't have the length. So, I mean, and they're classic courses. They're great golf courses that you hate to see championships not be able to play there because they're too short.
Yeah, particularly at a time, Mark, also when resources such as land, such as water, are being discussed all the time, and architects are finding ways to create a golf course on a few less acres, or do routings that offer, out one way, back the same way, perhaps, or that come home more often. So we'd even get away from playing 18 holes.
Oh,
all the
absolutely.
time. Yeah, a number of effects. So does this, Mark, you mentioned it, and it's been out there, and Mr. Nicholas has been talking about it for some time. Are the ball discussions still out there at the same time? Because obviously we've got, a combination here of control with the length of the driver and the composition of the ball would seem to be counteract to some extent, even the better physical condition that the players are in these days.
And I think that factors in a lot. I mean, just the overall physical training that these players are going through right now. I mean, that amounts to a lot of the increasing distance, I think. I mean, yeah, technology definitely plays a major part in it. The ball obviously plays a major part in it as well. There's not been any significant changes to the ball as of recently, and I don't think there obviously will be. I think that's the biggest thing is with the tours, especially. I mean, do you come up with one ball that's required to be played at all the tour events? That's a limited flight distance ball. Is that the answer? I don't know if that's the answer or not. I mean, that's a whole nother debate. I mean, again, I think it's exciting. I think spectators enjoy seeing these players hit the ball a country mile, basically. I think that's exciting for them to see. I mean, I enjoy it. I mean, when you see Bryson or some of these, like I said, these college players hit the ball, carry the ball 350, 370 yards in the air. I mean, that's phenomenal. I mean, it's just hard to fathom. And I mean, when you see it up close and then you look at it and then try to translate that into setting up a golf course for those players, it's a challenge. It's a good thing that there's not 156 players hitting the ball that far.
Yeah, that's for sure, Mark. We go back to when John Daly hit the scene, and he first was breaking the distance barriers, if you will, but kind of hitting it all over the place. And Tiger shows up and he brings in the accuracy to go along with that distance. And now Bryson is there, really adding more distance with tremendous accuracy as well. And as you say, when we've got the long holes, 417, and that ball that goes 380 in the air, takes those couple of bounces and rolls onto the green, that's a pretty exciting moment.
It is. There's no doubt about that. So just looking at this distance report, kind of thumb through it. I mean, you can see kind of hopefully everyone's seen this in the past, but if not, some pretty interesting charts on here. You kind of see those milestone areas like the oversized driver, where that came in, titanium drivers, the beginning and end of the wound balls, the multi-layer balls. You can see when we went to the multi-layer balls, and actually with the golf ball, those 2 years, basically from 2001 to really end of 2005, you can really kind of see those jumps, and that was all related to the golf ball. And then it's been pretty stable. I think you can see this last spike starting in 2017. I think that's more been, and this is just my opinion, from physical training. I think that's the biggest part of it. I think physical fitness has become such a big part of this game now.
And even with instruction, with high-speed cameras and metrics and analysis, we've learned more. We've learned more about power, about what the power sources are, and how to create that, and how to create, in essence, speed and balance at a time when the players are in better shape too. So that's an amazing count. That's the hat trick right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then if you jump into the next slide, I mean, you can kind of see this is how the USGNRA kind of combated a lot of this. I mean, with various rules that came in place, and you kind of see them on the timeline as well. It's with the spring-like effect, the indoor ball testing, spring-like effect again. So you can see a lot of that is starting to limit it, and it started to kind of stayed out. You can see again this last little jump a little bit again, number of factors on why that could be, but I think this model local rule 10 kind of combats the next 5 or 10 yards, because I mean you're not seeing significant increases on a yearly basis, but if you put a 5-yard increase because of everyone starting to go to these 48-inch long drivers, I mean that would be a significant jump when you look at these charts.
Significant jump to numbers that are already pretty much incredibly high.
Yeah.
As we look at them historically. Yeah. So Mark, your thoughts on the changes coming up, and again, all of this is effective. The driver length of 46 inches becomes effective January 1, 2022. And also the changes in the rules of amateur status. Mark, some thoughts on those?
Yeah. Yeah, really just on the amateur status real quick. I think it's a great change. I mean, again, it's really only a change where those amateurs can win prize money up to $1,000. It's really for those scratch golfers. I mean, it's not just all amateur events, it's scratch competition. So it has to be a scratch competition. And it's really geared toward those elite amateur events, really to give them the opportunity to really pursue their career and help offset some of those expenses. So I think that's a really good move. I think that will help out the game and help out amateur golf.
Well, certainly a lot of positive. Mark, you're in Texas, just can't not bring this up while you're in Texas. When was your last visit to Frisco?
I live in Frisco now. I've made the move from Palm Beach Gardens to Frisco. So I'm just down from the golf course. Haven't been out to the course probably in the last month. Been by it a few times, driven by it a few times, and it's coming along great. I mean, we're excited about 2023 and the KitchenAid Senior PGA Championship being the first event played there. I mean, I think the golf course is going to be phenomenal. I mean, right now you could play it, 90% of it's totally ready to go. I mean, they're working on fine details. So when we actually have our first championship, it will absolutely be perfect. And then just having a major championship there, either from a member side or a spectator side for the next 10 plus years. That's exciting. I mean, our members are going to be able to come here and play it in various events, and the spectator events are going to be there. So it's exciting. I think the golf courses, both golf courses are challenging and should produce great championships.
And Mark, I think if I remember correctly, that in 23, also the Junior League championship will move to Frisco. And kind of the only thing that's not on the schedule right now is the Ryder Cup. And that would, I think once the next domestic, we got the Olympic Club in 33, and we're almost out to 2040 for the holy mackerel.
We are down quite a ways. And I would foresee that potentially, if all goes well at all these other championships, that there will be a Ryder Cup contested there. But I mean, that is we'll wait and see how everything pans out.
Yeah.
But it is down the road. There's for a Ryder Cup.
Well, that's great. So Mark, we can't thank you enough for everything that you do for us, and joining us this morning and educating us. I mean, it's a very, very exciting time. The game is still booming, and even with the COVID variant, and we're grateful for that success and the inclusion. We expected some drop off there, some, but not too much. And we look forward to great coming up. So time to get ready for Tulsa. I mean, Tulsa's pretty much right around the corner, right? The 2022
Tulsa will be here before we know it. I mean, moving into winter, it's just a vicious cycle that we're getting ready to start all over again with the championship right around the corner, and senior and our PGA professional championship as well.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we've got a great schedule ahead, Mark. Again, thanks for your time. Best to you and the family. Give everybody our regards in Frisco, and we'll talk soon.
No, certainly. Thank you, Lynn. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care.
All righty. Bye.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you, Mark. You're, of course, welcome to stay. for our program. And as we've done historically for this past over a year and a half now, we bring on our Director of Governmental Affairs for the Southern California Golf Association, Craig Kessler. And we were fortunate yesterday, as a matter of fact, to have a California Alliance for Golf meeting in Ontario at the Southern California PGA offices to talk about strategic planning. Some very interesting things came up for that. But Craig, more importantly, the next few days, as we've talked about Assembly Bill 672, we have some work to do, some messaging to get out and to start on that. So how about we start with that, Craig?
Well, thanks, Len. And yes, it was good to be with everyone yesterday in Ontario. Len was there, a number of Northern Californians. It's good to get back to some face-to-face meetings. I know we're all starting to do it and hoping that the Omicron doesn't put a kink in that moving forward. I'm optimistic about that. And the theme, I think, of that long session, although it was positive in the sense that we found some common ground for moving positively forward as a unified industry in the state of California. But the common theme was just how besieged we are on so many different fronts. Ironically, at just the moment in which our game is up, it's hard to know which statistic to look at, roughly 30% over 2019 or pre-COVID days. But before I get to that, Len at the beginning of this broadcast introduced me as a voice of reason. And all I could think of was, am I doing something wrong? Because I've always taken to heart the famous George Bernard Shaw quip, almost a syllogism, about, it's the reasonable man conforms himself to the world. It's the unreasonable man who tries to conform the world to himself. That's all we know for sure, is that all human progress is made by those unreasonable men. So I've always fancied myself as one of those unreasonable persons who tries to change things and is never satisfied with the status quo and hopefully makes some progress. So Len, I guess no good deed or no good comment goes unpunished. You praised me with calling me reasonable, and here my first thought was, I wonder what he's really getting at. But leaving that aside, or as maybe as a window into the window that maybe people didn't want to see into a little bit of my thinking. Let me move on to that sort of theme of how we're being, why I concluded yesterday's meeting was a long, productive strategy session on how do we deal with the fact that we're being attacked is too strong a word, but being challenged on all sides. And so I'll start with where I think we've set the stage, and I've teased you, and on Monday the teasing is over. The Southern California Golf Association, as I've been promising, will on Monday begin, but by no means end in a one and done deal, a massive campaign to engage as many golfers, as many people in the industry as possible. But we are, again, the organization of not people in the industry, but people who actually just play golf. We're the ones with the large numbers, to get them to contact their legislators. Just to refresh your memories, this is a pretty educated crowd. Assembly Bill 672 was introduced in January of 2021, which is the opening of a 2-year session. We still do things the 19th century way in California. So we have 2-year sessions, which means the bills that don't make it in the first year of the session can survive into the second year in a truncated process, to be sure, but survive nonetheless if their author chooses to allow them to survive. Now, 672 at that time, in its first iteration, would have removed municipally owned golf courses, which, by the way, are 22% of the golf courses in California. Somewhere between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5 are owned by governments. Out from the protections of the Environmental Quality Act, the Surplus Land Act, the Park Preservation Act, and would have removed them from all local zoning prerogatives so that they could be developed into housing. There was hints in the first bill of affordable housing, but it didn't really define it. So I'm not sure what it meant. That was a case of, as I've characterized it in the past, legislative overreach, because there are certainly environmental groups that take the Environmental Quality Act seriously. Lots of people take the Surplus Land Act seriously, at least we in golf and some in the parks community take the Park Preservation Act seriously. But I'll have to say there are governments, I'd hate to name anyone, but if I named Arcadia, well, I didn't mean to say that, don't quote me, that really are not taking that particularly seriously and almost kind of inviting someone to, if you don't think we're doing it right, sue us. But I'll get to that another day. And of course, the whole notion of local zoning prerogatives, I think everyone understands, is a hot button issue with every small community in the state of California. Nonetheless, we passed a couple of pieces of legislation last year dealing with housing that did override local zoning control. For those of you who are wonky and know these numbers, it was Senate Bill 9 primarily, and to a lesser degree, Senate Bill 10. And for those of you who pay as much attention as I do to the news, will know that actually those are meeting as much opposition as there was to those bills. They're actually, if you do polling, about 58–60% of Californians agree with them. Keep that in mind when we're dealing with something like this and with the intersection of housing need and golf. We think golf's important, but keep in mind that when you poll California, it doesn't matter where you poll or who you poll, housing and housing affordability is considered to be the #1 problem. Lack of open space is a problem, but it's well down the list. And so again, keep that in mind. That bill in January didn't even make it to its first committee of reference for that reason. I think for those reasons, and in part, I was very encouraged by the response that we got in our first run-up to engage golfers on the bill. We got a lot of response, from a number of you, PGA professionals, Golf Course Superintendents Association did their usual crack response and did some really focused communications from golf facilities in key districts throughout the state. And those matter because generally, whether you're a GM, a golf professional, particularly a private club, because you're not just one constituent, but you are a constituency, a significant community asset in a neighborhood. So they know you're speaking for a lot more than one person. And in fact, a lot more if it's a private club than 300 or 400 or 500 members, because those members live in the community and they touch the lives of the rest of the community through school boards and churches and homeowners associations and just word of mouth, and of course on golf courses as well. So as encouraging as that was, it was a bad piece of legislation. And we waited and waited and waited to see whether the author was going to remain serious about it. And the author is Christina Garcia, who's a Democrat from Bell Gardens, or just sort of let it go and in the second year and let it sort of maybe perhaps die again of its own dead weight. On the second to that last day of the session, as we've informed everyone, the bill was substantially amended. Yes, in many respects, some of the bite was taken out of it. That's the good news, but that's also the bad news, because it means that by so doing, it eliminated a lot of those groups, environmental groups and others, that may have been sort of irritated by it and might be less irritated and less in opposition. In other words, it focused it down very much to a housing versus just municipal golf issue. And so it leaves intact Environmental Quality Act, local zoning prerogative, all those things. So it isn't quite as dire in the sense that if the legislation were passed, that means automatically 20% of the state's golf courses close, because many cities and counties and communities have no interest in making that move. But there is a $50 million financial incentive to developers to do that. And I needn't connect the dots between dangling money and how that moves political processes, particularly in small communities. Plus, there are financial advantages into changing the land use. Municipal golf courses don't pay property taxes, and truth be known, because of Article 10, Section 13 of the California Constitution, the golf course portions of all golf courses, including private clubs, pay as open space. So open space, even if it's reassessed every 3 years, as it would have been had Prop 15 passed, but it didn't last year, even at that pales in comparison to putting in hundreds of new housing units that would be assessed under Prop 13 at that moment in time, at their highest value in the market at that particular point. And that becomes a financial incentive for municipalities that get a portion of that, not so much for the state, but municipalities get a portion of it. And I've paid close attention to that dynamic, not so much in the municipal context, but in those examples where someone has tried to change the close a daily fee golf course in favor of development. They often run into trouble from local communities. We don't get involved in those. Because it's private property and that's just, there's no standing, and besides we'd cause more harm than good. So we leave that up to the locals. So on Monday, many of you or our members will be getting an alert complete with a very seamless and simple way to contact your legislators, and with a click, and even give you samples, whether you're an individual constituent, someone who's in the profession. That can be anyone who works in golf, it can be GMs, golf professionals, it can be superintendents, it can be someone who works in the restaurant, or because that's a different angle and a more financially visceral one, and also from a club as a club, which is a little bit larger. The arguments parallel each other, and I won't go into them, but they're somewhat similar. That's going to go out in a blast to the members. It's going to reside in a permanent place that you can find on the SCGA website. There's going to be a lot of collateral involved with it. We're very pleased to find out that a lot of retail outfits in Southern California recognize the same threat that we do, that what's so insidious about 672, it would be one thing if all the parks, all the open spaces, all the land conservancies, dare I get into the territory of, let's say, the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy, which is almost entirely within the city limits of Los Angeles and is off limits for any kind of development. And yet my guess is, it's been a long time since I've taken geography, but my strong guess is that you could take California's 1,000 golf courses and they comfortably fit within those confines with a lot of open space left. So it makes you wonder, why just single out municipal golf courses? And let me suggest it's because they think we're politically weak, which is why at least we're going to go full bore. I know the sections are going to go full bore. I know GCSA, I know the owners groups are going to go full bore. At this particular point, we're doing our due diligence in Sacramento. We're reaching out to municipal governments that have a lot of skin in this particular game. We are reaching out, we hope, to some environmental groups that recognize that this is an attack on open space. Municipal golf courses are parks after all. And we will do that, and we will have our legislative visits, and we'll do that in Sky's game well. But at the end of the day, in a self-governing democratic republic, what always matters most, never forget this, is you, is individual constituents, individual voters, individual community members. And that's why I think golfers at this point, that the SCGA is not, we're not in the habit of doing this. We're a traditional golf association with a multifaceted value proposition. And one of the facets of that value is that we work in this space and in this realm. But by no means are we an advocacy organization. We're an organization, again, of many, many functions and many, many values. But in this particular case, this is when I think, I don't know how reasonable I am, but I do know I'm given to using too many big words and a lot of academic arguments, and I too often sound like a lawyer, which bores people to tears, and at least seem reasonable. And so not given to exaggeration or trying to scare tactics, but this is the worst in terms of a piece of legislation that could cause damage to the golf industry in California. This one tops them all the rest of them put together that I've seen in 30 years. So I hope that we'll get lots of our members, lots of golfers, lots of persons who go Christmas shopping in a retail outlet off their backsides. And we've made it as easy as possible. The degree to which some of you may have passions beyond that and write personal letters and make phone calls, those are even more effective. But we're not counting on thousands doing that. That's just not a realistic expectation. So, and for those who may be thinking on this call, and on this call, I don't think there's a problem with, well, wait a minute, that's 22%, and I work in the 78%. I work in the daily fee sector, or I work for a private club. I think if you're a golf professional, you realize that if the opportunities shrink, so do your career potential shrinks. However, if you're a regular golfer, keep in mind that all of this is really related to what I think we came up yesterday at the CAG meeting in Ontario as really an assault on us. I think Patrick Casey from Brentwood is listening in today. I saw his name earlier when I scrolled down, and I'm sure he knows that famous Malcolm Gladwell screed was stimulated by Brentwood Country Club, and it's stimulated by the same people who think that that municipal golf shouldn't be in urban neighborhoods taking up 150 acres when we could build housing on it or do something else with it, is sort of the same spirit and the same group of persons who take objection, who think that perhaps golf courses shouldn't be taxed as open space. Because after all, if we tax them at highest and best use, we get, well, actually, we tax them at high and best use, that's what you get. And if communities want high rises and condos and traffic jams and no green space whatsoever, that's ultimately what you would get. And we shouldn't be shy about pointing that out. And we shouldn't be. So all of these things are related, and it has to do with our encumbrance of the land. And of course, we encumber land that takes too much water. And I'll close with that subject in just a moment. We know we're efficient irrigators, but I'll get into a point where that doesn't really matter as drought descends upon us. So I want to encourage you. I've said this so many times, golf professionals are the public's primary contact with you're the primary contact, in other words, with the golfing public. They know you at a public facility behind the counter in a private club. They're looking to the golf professionals for a lot of things. So the degree to which you're seen as leaders in these kinds of issues and getting those materials out, you are leaders. And I hope you'll assume the leadership position. And I hope that we will have as much response as possible. This is a key moment. I've said this many times this year. No, there's no principle better understood in politics than whose blood is in the water. Our blood's in the water here. And we need to get it out as fast as possible because they're going to keep coming. These onslaughts are going to keep coming. We have an image problem, but we have a reality problem too beyond the image. But the reality is much better than the image, and that's something I think that all golf organizations have begun to recognize and are beginning to sort of tackle. But again, I can't emphasize enough. Starting Monday, and it's not one and done. The SCGA has a rather comprehensive program for flowing this out over December. And then, of course, hitting the ground running even more so in January when the legislative session begins. So where it's going to go, I don't know. I think it's incumbent upon us to make our best effort because if this passes, again, I don't want to over exaggerate. That's not going to put in jeopardy every golf course, but it is going to establish the principle that golf and only golf is not to be part of the open space, parks, quality of life, mosaic, that somehow we're different. We don't bring the value all those other things do, and nothing but bad things can happen from that kind of legislative finding. Whether you're in the daily fee sector, the private sector, whatever sector, I'm encouraged that retail outfits recognize that they'll have less customers. It would be nice if some of the manufacturers recognize they too would have less customers. We'll see whether that holds moving forward. Moving on to other happy subjects, which is why this meeting yesterday, even though I've characterized it as a positive meeting, positive in the sense that everyone around the table recognized that we need to get our act together and do better in meeting these onslaughts. But I hope everyone understands that drought is descending upon us, that the State Water Project, at the earliest date in the history of the State Water Project, has reduced the allocation to 0%. That's 0%. That's how much water Metropolitan Water District and the 19 million customers in Southern California are going to get. And some of those areas are very, very dependent, some more than others, some less. But that is now Mother Nature could bail us out. But even if it does, take a close look at the headline in the Los Angeles Times today, Winter Tale, a no snow state. That's a pretty credible third-party academic study that they're citing, and that's been, really been circulating. It's been circulating long before the LA Times picked up on it. And yes, it's admittedly a bad case scenario, and things will probably be better than that. But we recognize that even now, even before the last 5 years, where we've seen a definite diminution of the snowpack and the water runoff from that snowpack, it was 20% less starting that period than it was in 1950. So we know that when the warmer and drier conditions, whether it's the Sierra Nevada, which apparently, according to meteorologists, is worse in this regard than the Colorado Basin, but even the Wasatch mountain range, all of it, a warmer and drier west is resulting even if we have average precipitation, less of it falls as snow, and even the amount that falls as snow, less of that ends up in the runoff that is the linchpin of our state water project. So yes, we've begun in the southern part of the state to explore potable reuse, aquifer recharge, stormwater capture, desalination, but all of those things take years to come to fruition. I think everyone recognizes just because Congress passed an infrastructure bill doesn't mean those highways and bridges are going to be built, they're going to be ready to go in 2023. All of these things take a lot of time. And I might add, as ratepayers, all of these things take a lot of money, which is why we've always been a little warmer and fuzzier to those things that assign rates in proportion to the impermeable surface you have as opposed to permeable, because that's one of the great benefits of golf courses is that we are part of the permeable ecosystem, and of course we're under permits and obligations not to allow runoff. So in many respects, we're good carbon sequesters and various other things that I hope we highlight moving forward. And by the way, that's part of the SCGA campaign in dealing with the value and dealing with one of the reasons why 672 is bad public policy, because of all the ecological benefits golf courses bring, in addition to the recreational benefits and the air quality benefits and so forth and so on. So final subject, because I've talked a mile a minute and got in a record time. I think all the information I wanted to share with you today. COVID-19, obviously we're all paying attention to Omicron. And I think we're all probably gratified that even in a place like the city of Los Angeles, which I think has been joined only by New York in the United States, that requires enter a golf course, clubhouse, or coffee shop, public or private, you have to check for vaccination. But it seems as if the industry can easily accommodate that without missing a beat. And of course, we know the outdoor game is perfectly safe no matter what happens. So I think we're in good shape on that, obviously. But the degree to which these things hurt economic growth and so forth, and some of the recovery, obviously, we need to pay attention to those things. Let me simply close. It's important to know what public opinion is. And if you follow all the polling, you follow all the reportage, if you follow it all, if you don't follow it all, you'll be happier perhaps, but that's another story. If you follow it, you'll understand, as I said earlier in this talk, that housing, homeless, are 1 and 2 on every poll. Open space used to be higher, it's dipped. To the degree to which challenges to golf courses, whether the challenge is the urban challenge of, gee, we could use it for housing, or the challenge is, gee, if we got rid of them, we could save a lot of water that we could use for homes. Keep in mind that in the context in which we're doing these things, I cannot emphasize enough the dangers of operating in an echo chamber. We know what we do. We know what we provide. We know the value we bring. We know we're up 30%. That doesn't mean that doesn't mean the policymakers know that. It doesn't mean the general public knows that. And it doesn't mean that either necessarily care about that. And my closing point goes back to what I opened with in terms of this massive campaign you're going to see from SCGA and other organizations starting Monday. The only way they're going to know is if we tell them. If we don't tell them, they won't know. And that's not their responsibility, nor is it their fault. That is ours. So that ball's in our court. Take it, run with it. Contact the SCGA. We'll be happy to help you run with it in any way possible. And I will simply say, as always, Thanks for inviting me on this. Of course, after I was so depressing today, maybe you won't invite me back, but thanks for inviting me on the broadcast. And it's always a pleasure to deal with the two sections in California. Len, I'm
Yeah.
relinquishing the floor now.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. I do have a question or two, and particularly the comment you made. You know, this is AB 672 is targeted to municipal golf courses, and you said they're if I got this right, they're a pretty good target because they're weak. Okay, what did you mean by that?
I said golf in general, all aspects of golf are a pretty good target because politically we are weak. There's no doubt if you take a look at the size of our industry and the scope, and you compare it to other industries in California of the same size and scope. I don't want to compare us to the oil and gas industry or trial lawyers or any of those people. That's a ridiculous comparison, unfair comparison. They are far better politically organized and ready to roll on these kinds of things than we are. It's as simple as that. Anyone who works in this space, it becomes painfully obvious. Now, there are a lot of reasons for it. I think for much of our history, we were self-evidently, or at least we thought we were, brought utility to communities, and we grew ridiculously rapidly for a long period of time. We had those stiff winds at our back. And so in the DNA of other industries, even this came up yesterday, as you know, Len, at the CAG meeting, that the California Restaurant Association is an extraordinarily good political advocacy organization. Yet 70% of their members go out of business every year. Yet even those struggling to stay in business, those that are in business, understand the need to fund that CRA because of how important it is. We just don't have that in our history. I think we're coming to that realization now, as you see. And like I stated, politics knows no principle more than whose blood is in the water. And as you go, whether it's, who should we tax? Who should we go for? How should we posture? If you converted every municipal golf course in the state into housing tracts, do you think we would solve our housing shortage? Now, if we put, and I've always thought, if we put all the public lands into a big pot and then made rational decisions about which ones were perhaps the most effective salves to the housing problem, we lost a couple of golf courses as a result. I think that would be we would be part of a shared sacrifice in order to make our society better and respond to a need. But to simply be one singled out, and when you're singled out and someone thinks that they can actually single you out and succeed politically, that should be a big, fat billboard that says, we think we can push you around. The only response to that is to say, no, you can't. We can be treated fairly, and this is an equity argument. But the key here is not golf versus housing. The key here is, why is it that all these other uses are off limits and sacred and not in a bill, and public golf courses are? And again, everyone on this call knows that when you look at park systems, golf courses are actually the most utilized. Now, most don't know this. Tennis is the least utilized, by the way, in every study. That's neither here nor there. That's not the perception. And we have not been done a good job in articulating that reality, because quite honestly, the golf community looks at government and says, well, we don't like it, let's just stay away from it. Well, those who choose not to participate in a self-governing democratic republic will always be on the losing end. So we need to participate. That was the point I was trying to make. Not that there's something wrong with the municipal golf courses. Torrey Pines is a municipal golf course. I think everyone understands it's not weak. I'd call that a very strong facility. So I hope I answered your question, Len, and then some, but you probably knew I would do that.
And you did, Craig. Thank you. And thank you for all that. And so we'll look, as Craig mentioned a number of times, and we talked about it yesterday at our California Alliance for Golf meeting. We have some serious messaging to do now in year end, and the materials will be out for the Southern California Golf Association on Monday. We will follow and assist with that ourselves as a Northern California PGA, getting word out to our membership to be in touch with their Congress people and legislatures and such. The Northern California Golf Association is certainly the California PGA as well. So the COVID brought us.
I'm going to interrupt and say that we've devised most of the materials so that they can be used by any other organization. and that was conscious. And so we hope and our hope is that you steal it and use it. That's our fondest hope here.
Yeah, and thank you for you and Kevin Fitzgerald, and Craig, for putting all that together and keeping us so in front of it, because it is as critical as you say. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll start to wrap up here on Friday, December 3rd. Again, thank you for being with us, Mark. Mark Chetchat, Senior Director of Membership Championships, Rules and Competitions. Thank you again, Mark, for being with us, and Craig, as always. That, if I've got this right, becoming an honorary member of the Southern California PGA at their annual meeting on December 12th. Is that correct?
I'm trying to unmute myself. Yes, that's a tremendous honor. I'm very appreciative. One of the great things in this long journey I've had in the golf industry is meeting so many people, and just met a lot of GMs, a lot of pros, and obviously the staffs at both sections. And it's that's been one of the meeting a lot of great people has been really one of the, that's what makes all that negative stuff worthwhile, is meeting all the good people that we can get in the trenches with. So I'm thank you very much to the Southern California PGA section.
Well, thank you, Craig, for everything that you've done to earn that. And Tony Latendre has joined us. Tony, I see your name there, and you now joined Bryce as the representative from Southern California PGA. How about some closing remarks? Tony, good to see you.
Well, thank you. Good to see everybody and good to be with everybody. I apologize for being on a couple minutes late this morning, as I'm sure you're all dealing with at your clubs. Just always putting out fires, it seems. But we will get through this and hopefully be better on the other side. Just as a closing remark, I hope everybody has a happy holiday, and thank you for allowing me to be with you today. So Len, Craig, Mark, great to see you, and everybody involved. So thank you very much. Appreciate you all.
Great. Thank you, Tony. And okay, ladies and gentlemen, as we said, please continue to be safe. Please continue to be healthy. Please continue to be with friends and families as we head into a very special time of the year for all of us. And we'll have our schedule out for our chat in January. We'll just keep going, and we'll just keep going together. And in the meantime, as we've said, be ready for us to receive some emails and a call to action. This is the call to action regarding Assembly Bill 672. So once again, best to all, and thank you for joining us today.